financial pressure, and his father's declining health. Then, in 1994, everything exploded at once. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, an idea so odd that multiple studios had passed on it, opened in February and turned a $15 million production into a $100 million hit. 5 months later came The Mask, which used early CGI to turn Jim's face and body into something close to a living cartoon, eventually grossing around $350 million worldwide. Before the year was even over, Dumb and Dumber opened in December and pulled in roughly $250 million more. In a matter of months, Jim went from fighting for recognition to reportedly earning $7 million a film, closing the gap between a fantasy check in his wallet and his actual paycheck. But behind the explosive success was a much quieter struggle. Carrey later revealed he had been on antidepressants for a long stretch of his life, describing his emotional state as a repeating cycle of highs and prolonged lows, with some accounts suggesting the medication used dated back to the 1980s. The manic comedic energy audiences loved was happening alongside a depression few people knew about. By 1998, that undercurrent surfaced more visibly with The Truman Show. Hollywood still mostly saw Jim as a rubber-faced comedian, so landing a serious dramatic role took real effort. He pushed hard to get in front of director Peter Weir, who would later call his audition the best he'd ever seen. The film won Carrey a Golden Globe, but the Academy passed him over for an Oscar nomination entirely, and his emotional, half-joking acceptance speech reflected both the win and that sting. The intensity only deepened with Man on the Moon in 1999, where Jim didn't simply play Andy Kaufman. He stayed immersed in the role, including Kaufman's abrasive alter ego Tony Clifton, for the entire 5-month shoot. Co-star Danny DeVito would later describe the experience as unsettling, since Jim seemed to disappear into character even when cameras weren't rolling. Physical suffering came next with How the Grinch Stole Christmas in 2000. Early makeup sessions reportedly ran over 8 hours, settling into a routine of roughly 2.5 hours each morning and another hour to remove each night across a 92-day shoot. Jim has said it felt like being buried alive, and the production allegedly brought in a former interrogation resistance trainer just to help him cope mentally with the process. By 2004, that emotional weight carried into Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a role many still regard as his finest dramatic work. Director Michel Gondry reportedly wanted Jim's real post-breakup rawness to inform the character, and Carrey has said he felt genuinely hollow and erased at the time, which is part why the performance still resonates as so unusually real. That same year, his Fashion Week comments about not believing in his own existence weren't really an isolated moment. They came after Jim had already begun retreating from the traditional entertainment machine and turning toward painting, often dark and politically charged, as an outlet. The remarks felt less like a joke or a breakdown, and more like a public rejection of celebrity identity itself. That same reflective, melancholy thread ran through Kidding, his Showtime series from 2018 to 2020, in which he played a children's TV host whose cheerful public persona was quietly falling apart. Reports suggest Jim helped shape the show as a way of processing his grief over Catriona White's death. It ran 2 seasons and earned him a 7 Golden Globe nomination. And for many viewers, the parallel to Carrey's own life felt impossible to ignore. After 2022 Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Jim spoke seriously about retiring, saying that after roughly 35 years of playing characters, the work had become spiritually draining. Any future return, he said, would need to be for something that truly mattered to him, while he focused instead on painting and his personal relationships. Nearly 3 years passed with no major public appearances until November 2025, when he appeared to induct Soundgarden into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Los Angeles. He seemed calmer and more grounded than the hyperactive public image people remembered. Fitting, since his connection to the band dated back to 1996, when he pushed them to appear as musical guests during his SNL hosting stint. Around the same time, another long-hidden piece of his life came into focus. Jim and a woman known publicly as Min had reportedly first been photographed together in February 2022, leaving a comedy charity event in Los Angeles, a sighting that drew little attention at the time. For roughly 4 years, the relationship stayed almost entirely out of the public eye, aided by Min's minimal social media presence. That changed in February 2026, when Jim received an honorary César Award. In the fall of 2017, Jim Carrey stood on a red carpet at a fashion event and calmly told a reporter that he didn't believe he existed. To many watching, it looked like a breakdown, the culmination of years of grief, legal battles, the death of Catriona White, and a depression he had quietly carried since the 1980s. Not long after, he stepped back from public life almost entirely. When he resurfaced years later in 2026, he had someone new by his side, a woman the world had never seen before, even though she'd apparently been part of his life for 4 years already. To understand how he got there, it helps to go back to the beginning. James Eugene Carey was born on January 17, 1962, in Newmarket, Ontario. His family eventually settled in Scarborough, near Toronto, but money was always scarce. His father, Percy Carey, was a talented saxophone player, and from him Jim learned early that talent alone doesn't pay the bills, and that losing everything was always just around the corner. That fear became reality when Jim was about 12. His father lost his job at a tire factory, and the family ended up living out of a Volkswagen van, not as an adventure, but as a genuine survival situation. Some accounts even describe the family camping in a tent near Lake Ontario for a stretch. Sleep, privacy, and stability all but disappeared, and school became an afterthought. Jim's teenage years weren't spent on sports or dating. They were spent trying to get through each day and help keep his family afloat. Eventually, the family found a strange kind of relief. They moved into a house across from the same tire factory on the condition that they worked there as janitors and security staff. As a teenager, Jim worked overnight 8-hour shifts cleaning the plant, then dragged himself to school the next morning to try to function like a normal student. It didn't work for long. His grades and energy collapsed, and on his 16th birthday in 1978, he dropped out. Wanting to be a comedian and actually succeeding at it were two very different things, and Jim found that out the hard way. At just 15, wearing a suit his mother had sewn for him, he bombed his first real stand-up set at a Toronto comedy club. He left the stage in total silence. For most kids, that would have been the end of it. Instead, Jim treated the failure as a lesson rather than a verdict. He studied audiences, refined his timing, and kept pushing. With no diploma and no fallback plan, comedy wasn't just a dream anymore. It was the only road left. In 1981, at 19, he left Canada for Los Angeles with almost nothing. No money, no connections, no guarantee anyone would care. He started over at the bottom, working open mics and, by some accounts, sleeping in his car during the leanest stretches. Slowly, things began to shift. Rodney Dangerfield noticed him and brought him on as an opening act, giving Jim his first real exposure to large audiences instead of near-empty clubs. Even so, the 1980s were not kind. He auditioned for Saturday Night Live twice and was rejected both times, allegedly written off before he even had a fair shot. Then came a brief glimmer of hope, the lead role in the NBC sitcom The Duck Factory in 1984. It should have been his breakthrough. Instead, the show aired for exactly 3 months before being canceled. Through the rest of the decade, Jim bounced between stand-up gigs and minor acting roles, barely getting by. In 1987, in an act that says everything about his mindset at the time, he wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered, post-dated years into the future, and carried it in his wallet as a reminder of what he believed was coming. It's a strange footnote made stranger by the fact that in 1994, he really would earn exactly that amount for Dumb and Dumber. The real turning point came in 1990, when Jim joined the Fox sketch show In Living Color. As the only white regular in a cast built to showcase black talent, he had nothing to lean on but sheer performance. And he delivered, throwing himself into sketches with an almost manic physicality. His character Fire Marshal Bill became a standout, born, according to Carey, from a much darker rejected pitch that never stood a chance of making air. Reportedly, he sometimes stayed in the character's voice and expression between takes, unsettling people on set, a sign of just how fully he committed to a role, even off camera. All of this success arrived while his personal life was quietly falling apart. Strain in his first marriage,